Hi, everybody. It's the Stratosphere Lounge, brought to you through the miracle of post-production. As usual, all the levels are perfect. Sound has been thoroughly checked out. The picture's intact. The studio's nice and dry. No water leaking or anything like that. We are, as always, spend several hours just preparing everything here to get all the meters exactly right where they want to be. I just want you guys to know that that's how much we care. Probably an hour or so, maybe two, of time. Just basically coming in, just going through the basics, making sure that everything's all switched correctly, and that we've got the right music cues up, and that all of our other stuff is working correctly, because that's the kind of quality that this show is known for. In any event, welcome to Stratosphere Lounge episode 120, and I just wanted to say that things have been really pretty humming around here. We did, in fact, get a significant number of members, a large number of members from PJTV came over, and that means that this is actually, for the first time ever, really kind of a business. It was always sort of, I want to say maybe a boutique or a studio. It's actually a business now. Will Carla make her Hitchcockian cameo again? I think she might. She's in every Stratosphere Lounge. She was in the original 120 of them. She's always somewhere in the background. Maybe she's one of the pictures or hiding on the back, or she's always in every one of them. Yeah, it's actually starting to feel like a business. The best part of it is, needless to say, that I get to hire my friends Steve and Scott because of your generosity. And that's a nice feeling. We've done 6 weeks of Right Angle now, and we haven't missed a day. I haven't missed an episode. That's nice for a little outfit like this. The outfit at PJTV was, as you probably know by now, 2 graphics people, sound person, director, camera people, a couple of producers, stage manager. Now it's the 3 of us and Carla, and it's going along really well. So we're really, really proud of the Right Angle shows. And I do have some interesting news. And that news is that we are going to be debuting a new show here at BillWhittle.com, based on the fact that so many people did come over. It's not like we're wallowing in money, but we are extremely grateful. And one of the things we wanted to do was to produce a new show with my friend Scott Ott. So here's what we were talking about doing. We have a lot of requests for people who just want some news stuff. And it's hard for me to stay on the news cycle only because my post-production tail is as long as it is. I got so much editing to do and so on. And as many of you know, back at the old network, Scott did a couple different shows. He did Scott Odd Thought, which was commentary kind of like Afterburner and Firewall. Not as spectacular, obviously, but I mean, nevertheless, it was that. And then he also did the PJTV News Break. And so when we realized that we had enough scratch to keep us in, pundit chow, we sat down with Scott and I said, listen, is there any chance that we could make our members happy by giving them a news show that was a combination of both PJTV News Break and the Scott Odd Thought? In other words, Scotty, is there a way that you could do once a week a show that looked at the top 3 or 4 stories of the week, and then basically you tell us what happens, then you put your spin on it, and you give us the Scotty Ott option on all these things? And he said, yeah. So I've got a pilot here. Now the background is about right. You're going to see some foreground elements that Scott just threw together. I also want to stress that this is his first test ever with the cameras that we sent him. So blue screen, lighting, makeup. This is essentially a camera test. But the reason I like it is because the second Scott sent me this, I just started screaming. I said, that's exactly what we want. Exactly. It's exactly right. It's exactly the tone. So, we have tested this clip out probably 30 or 40 times before we went on the air today, so I'm sure everything will run just exactly normally. But if they don't, then give me a second. And anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Scott's title is perfect. And since it's going to show up in the second, I would tell you what the title is. Scott has decided to call this show News, actually, and that's exactly precisely what I was looking for. Something a little whimsical, something a little different, and this show will be for members, and we'll probably do a cut down that we'll put out for the public. But this essentially is to thank all the people that came over. And without further ado, here is a little bit of news, actually, with my friend Scotty Ott, and let's roll it.
This is news. Actually, I'm Scott Ott. The Secret Service on Friday shot a man who allegedly brandished a gun near the White House. The suspect, taken into custody and treated at a nearby hospital, said he can't understand why the Secret Service shot him because even though he had a gun, he wasn't a threat to the president since he was nowhere near a golf course. President Obama said that a U.S. drone strike killed the leader of the Afghan Taliban, Mullah Akhtar Mohammed Mansour. Excuse me. With their leader gone, Obama called on the Taliban to, quote, seize the opportunity, joining the Afghan government in a reconciliation process that leads to everlasting peace and stability. I'm sorry, did I say everlasting? I meant lasting peace and stability. A Taliban spokesman reportedly said, Obama is right. We were mistaken about the Quran. Muhammad wanted only lasting peace and stability. Where do we sign up? With Mullah Mansour dead, the Taliban will now seek a replacement that has all of Mansour's strengths with none of his weaknesses. Taliban officials are said to be surfing LinkedIn for a devoted Muslim with jihad industry experience, a preference given to candidates under 4 feet tall, capable of rapid evasive maneuvers, and with no detectable heat signature. An ABC News Washington Post poll shows Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in a dead heat for the White House. The poll also shows that 4 in 10 Republicans don't think that Trump's views reflect the core values of the party. Now, Trump said that pollsters probably didn't explain to voters in the survey what his core Republican views are. Winning, beating Hillary, and also other things. That I can tell you. Bernie Sanders vows to fight for the Democratic nomination to the bitter end. He said DNC Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz has stacked the deck in favor of Hillary Clinton. Go figure. Sanders said if he's elected president, he will not reappoint Schultz to her DNC leadership post. A spokesman for Schultz said, and people wonder why we have superdelegates. In an effort to mollify angry Sanders supporters, the DNC allowed the Vermont senator to pick 5 members of the DNC Platform Committee, with Hillary Clinton choosing 6 and Wasserman Schultz picking the remaining 4. Now, you might think that Sanders is still outnumbered 2-1, but that just means that you didn't learn math through Common Core now, did you? The non-binding Democratic platform is crafted to let voters know what the party would stand for if it were not nominating Hillary Clinton. This is news. Actually, I'm Scott Ott. This is news.
I just love that boy. I do. I just love him. The writing on the first pilot was even funnier, and needless to say, what we've got here is just we slapped a graphic background on. We just did the first of the chroma key tests and so on. We've got a really nice news package that features the element behind us, the rotating Earth. We're going to slow down quite a bit. And then all the elements look like an actual news show, and Scott's going to be going to be pounding that out and pretty much doing it at home and doing his own production value on it. And that's what means it can actually, get out the door. So our plan is, we've been doing so much for free here for so long. I was up at Cal Poly, and I had done a rough thumbnail estimate of just a real super rough guess of how many total views I'd had in the time I've been on, over a course of hundreds, probably certainly thousands of videos. And I was trying to figure out what that number was, and I thought it was around 30 to 40 million. But a guy at Cal Poly, one of the students, spent a little more time on that than I did, and he says it's closer to 100 million total views everywhere over everything. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. We don't have that many members. We've got considerably fewer than that. And the reason I bring up the total numbers and the amount of work is we've been giving out an awful lot of free ice cream, and we're going to continue to give out the free ice cream. But the free ice cream, which used to be paid for by other people's checks, is now being paid for by the audience. And so news actually is going to be members-only content. However, I think what we'll probably do is edit down at least one of those beats, if not two of them, and release them at the end of the week for the public so they can at least get a taste of it and see what they're missing. But I just couldn't be happier with it, and Scott's style is terrific. He's just such a terrific guy to work with. He's so, he's it. He's the guy. The four we shot, the right angles we shot yesterday are just terrific. And we're going to get that graphics package, buffed up a little bit. We'll get the image quality a little bit better. And needless to say, we'll bring in pictures where it just kept saying news actually the whole time. So with that said, I think it's going to be great. And it's nice to be able to pay back both the new people that came over, well, not pay them back, give them something exciting, and especially nice to provide it for the people that have been, slugging it out with me here since the beginning, almost 2.5 years ago. So yeah, it's starting to look like a business here. Steve and Scott are back. We're going to try and see about doing Hair of the Dog or bring back something else that Steve did. A couple people have asked about Klavan. Klavan is a possibility. He's working just down the street with Jeremy Boring and Ben Shapiro doing the Daily Wire stuff. And I talked to Jeremy about it, and I said, is there a world where if I don't have to pay for Klavan, you don't have to pay for me? Klavan's in there pretty much almost every day. I'll come over one day a month like we did back at the old place and or one every 2 weeks and do 8 episodes and, eight segments. We've gotten really good at it. And he said he wants to think about it. So there's a chance even that we can bring back to the fold the Klavan Whittle show, although even that will probably be under a new name. It's always good to start new names because, number one, it's kind of a new branding, and secondly, you get out of, any potential legal troubles. So the Klavan thing could come back as well. And, all of this is based on memberships. It's based on the people that did actually move. And certainly if you want to bring some more of this over, we'd love to have you. But you're not going to get a big commercial from me tonight because we did what we had to do. We really just did what we had to do. And I was not sure what we would, but we did. So happy days. We can always use new members. So let's get on to Stratosphere Lounge 120 because one of the things about Right Angle's 4 shows it's 5. It's 5 shows a week. It's a Bill show, a Steve show, a Scott show, a members only show, plus the backstage show, which is our conference call, which I'm really glad to be showing because I always thought those conference calls were really fun. But that's 5 new pieces of video that have to be edited every week. We've got some junior birdmen coming in here, and they're literally 15-year-old is cutting some of this stuff, and we're going to start moving him up. He's already doing most of the right angles. We'll get him into some of the other stuff like Nexus Report Time Over Target, give me a little more room. But I'm still scrambling to get things like the next firewall out, which is called Bernie's Free College Isn't Free. Had jury duty last week, and that just knocked a week right out of me. It was just really, really tough. Schedule-wise. Went in for 2 days to find out that they didn't need me. But, yeah. Anyway, so we're about set to go. So we'll do a fairly short one tonight. But I get the feeling that the weather's starting to clear as we bring in more and more people. As we're able to afford more and more editors, that means that the more members we get in, the more people we can hire to do kind of the bottom level stuff, and that frees me up to do more of the top level stuff, like making sure that the telephones have been adequately sanitized and just keeping the place vacuumed. It's actually really exciting. By the way, I was out at San Luis Obispo talking to somebody about some videos that we're probably going to be shooting for younger people. I haven't figured out what we're going to do there yet, but I think I might do the Common Sense Resistance thing that we originally had in mind before I started thinking about it as a feature film. We could do these. We've got a contract to do a certain number of videos, at least 6 for millennials. We're working with Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk, we're all going to be working for Charlie Kirk someday. And we are basically trying to figure out how we're going to skin this thing. I've got a pretty good idea what we're going to write about, but I don't think that me in front of a green screen is exactly the way to do it. So I think what we're going to do is go to that idea that I've been hanging on to for a while, and we'll probably just call this the Common Sense Resistance, and I'll probably shoot the first one underneath, on a pile of rubble someplace and the only light will be the light coming off of the, the iPad or whatever, and then we'll shoot them in sewer pipes, and we'll shoot them in drainage ditches, and we'll shoot them out back, everything, and we'll just get kids to do some of them, and we'll split up the delivery duties, and I think it could be pretty cool. It'll certainly be a little more rad and a little more visually interesting and dramatic, and much shorter. I gotta keep these things under 3. That's very hard for me. I should try to keep them under 2. But we're excited about that. So anyway, I was talking to somebody over at Cal Poly about that, who I think is going to be a big part of helping us out in the future. And I was coming back, and I just got delayed. I started yapping and flapping my jaws, and I wanted to get out of there by around sunset, because it takes about 45 minutes for the sun to go down. And in the long easy, it's about a 45-minute flight. As a matter of fact, I'm going to cheat and pull up a picture. I didn't know if I was going to go into this, but I'm going to. I'm sure some of you saw it, or most of you saw it on a Facebook page. But in any event, so there I was, surrounded by Bengal tigers, and I ended up getting out of there later than I wanted, to say the least. So I got to the airplane at least half an hour after I wanted to be there, and then I thought I was just going to get the fuel and just cruise on out of here, but that's not what happened. And you're going to have to excuse me while I try and get this little picture up, because it's a really cool little picture. And as a matter of fact, what actually happened was things were quite delayed waiting for the fuel truck. The fuel took almost 45 minutes, not that long, half an hour, maybe half an hour to get there. Where's that darn picture? I just dragged it onto the desktop. What kind of this is just straight up communism. That's what it is. I'll do it again. Fine, I'll do it again. And so I ended up leaving San Luis Obispo at least 45 minutes later than I wanted to. And that's an interesting little story, because getting back to Los Angeles from San Luis Obispo is not a super long flight or anything. It's only about 40 minutes. But it's 40 minutes direct, and by the time I got out of there, there we go. Now I can finally tell this story in peace. Just give me 1 second. I'll just drag this in here, set it up, and you get an idea what the heck I'm going all this trouble for. That's you, and you need to get the right audio, and then I think we'll be good to go. Good. So, so I put a new engine monitor in the airplane, and the old engine monitor was an LCD display, and you'd look down at it, and it would basically say, it'd be a little tiny little indication. It'd be like OT, and then a black, number, 193, and you'd have to literally walk yourself through it. I think OT is oil temperature, and then 193 is probably pretty good, actually, not too bad. It should be less than how much? 220, 230. So I've been looking at this thing down here with all these just number displays, and they're very, very poor compared to analog displays, because analog displays show you relationship distances. You can just glance at it and get the idea. And so anyway, I got a new engine monitor put in the airplane. I got a Dynon D10, which is a tiny little thing, really, about that big. But glancing down there, I can just glance down there, and everything is in the green. The RPM is in the green, manifold pressure is in the green, oil temperature is in the green, oil pressure is in the green, fuel pressure is in the green, all this stuff. Just glance down, there it is. And when one of the parameter starts to get out of the green, like one of the temperatures started getting a little hot, then it'll start to give you a little orange flash, a yellow flash, let you know. So it's a tremendous thing. So anyway, I took off out of San Luis Obispo at late dusk, and I started heading back for Los Angeles direct. And I don't normally talk to SoCal, but I was going up high and direct. So I called in to actually talk to LA Center first, I guess, and they gave me a squawk code, and I start going over there. Now, I know up ahead of me are some serious mountains, and I know that I've got the synthetic vision on ForeFlight that I can see the mountains. And legally, I'm good to fly because I can see the ground. I'm in contact with the ground, so I'm just flying night VFR. And I climbed to 7,005, which is pretty high for me. But then I decided, I'm not aware of anybody ever colliding with the top of the sky. I'm going to go to 9.5. So we went to 9,005. But I'll tell you all of this stuff just to tell you this. This is the picture that I took once we got back on the ground, me and the little airplane here. And here's what I want to say about that. When you fly at night over mountainous terrain in a single-engine airplane, you would be amazed at how much attention you can pay to an engine monitor. You'd be absolutely astonished at how much attention you can pay to an engine monitor. You would just sit there, I would just sit there, and I would watch that thing like a hawk. Start to see the hottest temperature starting to get, up to 420 or something. Well, let's just come back on the power. Let's enrich in the engine. Let's do all that stuff. Enrich the engine. Let's just, watch it. And then all the time, too, there's that little voice in the back of your head. Panic voice usually is on the front of your head screaming, get out of there. But the little voice in the back of your head is your instrument rating voice. And it's basically saying things like, okay, are you level? Yes, we're level. Are we climbing? No, we're holding altitude. How's our course? We're right on course. Dropped a piece of paper. And then you're just kind of buttoning down because you've got all these reflections inside the canopy, and out there's nothing but really a lot of black. In any event, I thought leaving San Luis Obispo, I thought once I got up to 6,000-7,000 feet, I'd be able to see the lights of the LA Basin. But unfortunately, no. I could see scattered lights down there, but I couldn't see the LA Basin. And I was flying for 20-25 minutes before I started to see this orange glow up ahead. And as this pretty girl and I came out of, get closer, 9,500, then I could see all of the San Fernando Valley. And once I had the San Fernando Valley made, I really relaxed because then I can at least, put it down on a road or something if I needed to. But there was a period there for about, 20 minutes where it's like, you really have to concentrate now. There's an old saying about flying at night over rough terrain, and that is that the emergency procedures for landing over rough terrain at night is if you have the engine fail, you turn on the landing light, you basically make sure that there's no problem with the fuel pump or anything, crack the canopy, get your position ready, you slow down to minimum controllable airspeed, and then basically you look out the window, and if you don't like the terrain, then you turn the landing light off. And that thought was not escaping me at all. So it was a great experience, actually. It was a real bonding experience, and the more that the plane and I come through events like that, the more confidence I have in it, and that it has in me. But it was the most let's just say focused flying I've done in a long time, and it's nice to have that instrument training. It's nice to have the ability to just stay on top of all these things. Just the scan, level, yes. Are we turning? No. Are we climbing? Nope, we're good. Are we on course? Yes. How's the engine? Engine looks good. Just around and around and around and around and around again. And then suddenly you can, you can practically, given the amount of light in LA, you can practically almost need sunglasses coming down. So anyway, we had a good time, the little Long Easy and me. And that's my little flying story for today. And so now let's get into the questions because we have to make this relatively brief. I've got, 7, 8, 9, 10, something like that. So, beginning, here we go, from Susan Speakman. Hi, Bill, glad you're back. Thank you, Susan. Glad to be back. What do you think of P.G. O'Rourke's endorsing of Hillary? Betrayal of conservative principles, pragmatic decision-making, tough love for America, or something else? I didn't know that he'd endorsed Hillary until I saw the question, Susan. My personal reaction would be, first of all, I just consider it kind of heartbreaking. But I have a lot of friends who are in the Never Trump camp. I'm just not. I'm not in the Never Trump camp. I don't think he's a conservative. I have enormous concerns about him. Enormous concerns about him. But Hillary Clinton watched people die on TV as a result of her not sending the relief that Ambassador Stevens wanted. Hillary Clinton has been the most corrupt individual in American politics since she started in Watergate. She lied to the American people about this catastrophe, said it was due to a movie, had a filmmaker put in jail for a year. So putting aside all the Benghazi thing, Hillary Clinton has compromised national security probably in a way that even, what's his name, didn't get, Snowden. I mean, this is the Secretary of State who is copying and pasting above top secret special access program information, cutting and pasting it, emailing it to herself on a server in an apartment someplace in New York State. And I think it's all gone. I think the entire security is gone. And the very, very least, from what I would imagine happens in the intelligence community, we have to assume it's gone, right? I mean, if it turns out that she's got all this stuff on such an insecure server, and now all this stuff is available to be stolen, we have to assume that it's been stolen, which means that we have to restart all of these programs. And my God, it's just treasonable arrogance. Donald Trump hasn't left anybody out to die, near as I can tell, and Donald Trump hasn't taken those kind of liberties with national security, as near as I can tell. And that's good enough for me. I know principled people on our team who are, they're not going to vote for him, and PJ O'Rourke's obviously one of them, because he perceives, I think, that the damage he could do in our name overwhelms a Hillary, another 4 years of Obama and stuff. I'm not sure we can survive another 4 years of Obama, and I've said many times before, I think the appeal of Trump is that he is the destroyer, and people think I'm being demeaning in that way. I'm not really. I think he is the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and I think that's what people like about him. I think they like the fact that he's a wild card. I think they like the fact that they don't know what he's going to do. They just are going to assume that he's going to do something dramatic. One of the reasons I'm not as worried about this as some of my friends are, as far as Donald Trump misbehaving himself out of there, is if Donald Trump is elected president, all of a sudden there'll be a press corps again. And if there's a press corps again, all of a sudden there'll be a Congress again. When Mitch McConnell says that impeachment for Barack Obama is off the table 3 years before his term ends, what do you think? What do you think a guy like that's going to do? Why is it off the table? We all know why it's off the table. So impeachment is not off the table for Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, I think the impeachment hounds or vultures rather are going to be circling low as far as Donald Trump is concerned. And is this fair? No. But having a media watchdog back gives me some hope. And people think Donald Trump could just start a nuclear war. He can't. Obviously, and neither could Obama. You can't just walk out one day and say, I've decided to nuke China. It just doesn't work that way. It's just not possible. And I cannot bear the thought of watching that woman get sworn in. She was criticizing Donald Trump for Trump University and how she basically says he lied to the American people. It's like, lady, you have compromised the security of all of us. You've compromised the security of all of us. You've gotten people killed who were fighting to defend the flag that you just don't care enough about. And the email server thing and Trump University are not equivalent scandals in my mind. In fact, there is no equivalent scandal. People do not understand exactly how much damage this woman has done. The press just won't cover it. So look, I don't have to decide until the day I have to decide, but I certainly would never stake out a never Trump position. He's my least favorite candidate. I think I don't think he's a conservative. I don't think he really, when I say I don't think he wants the job, I don't think he expected to get this far. And most of the things he says off the cuff are alarming. However, the next day he walks him back. And a lot of people say, well, that's the problem. But what it really means to me is when he makes one of these faux pas that scares the living daylights out of people, it's not that he's coming in with it's not like he's coming in with this agenda. I think he's just coming in and just shooting blind. And when somebody says you can't do this, he just backs up and says, okay, well, I'll do something else then. Look, I think this is the worst choice that we've had in this country ever. And I want to see Hillary Clinton go to jail because she deserves to go to jail. And there's only one way that's going to happen. And Donald Trump is the way. So I'll close by saying this. The protections, the constitutional protections built into the structure of our federal government are designed. There she goes. There goes her Alfred Hitchcock moment. She's in every single Stratosphere Lounge show. See you, Carla. Everybody wanted to know if you're going to be making the walk, and they all say hi. We have protections against tyranny, and these protections against tyranny would have stopped Barack Obama from ramming Obamacare down our throats, and they would have stopped any number of these erosions of our freedoms. They would have stopped any attack on the Second Amendment. These protections in there in the Constitution are designed to protect against tyranny. But if it turns out that the iron triangle of Democrats in Washington, the news media in New York, and the pop culture in Hollywood are determined that the American people are never going to know about any of these things, and that the representatives, Republican representatives, are so cowed by not wanting to be seen as racist or misogynist that they will not act, then another 4 years is another 4 years for them to completely just rot away the foundations of what's left of this thing. And I would rather take a chance with a guy who may in fact be a tyrant, because he cannot pull it off here. He just can't. He can't pull it off here because, unlike the previous occupant, the press will be on the job for this guy, and so will the Congress, and that encourages me. So who knows? That's why the vice president pick is really kind of important, I think. All right, moving on. Steve Darrow had a long question, and then he followed up with a kind of a second one, which I liked a little better, so I hope that's all right with you, Steve. I've taken the tail end of your two-part question here. Steve Darrow says, you voiced your approval for the interstate highway system, NASA, and FAA regulations, along with others that escape my memory right now. An argumentative lefty would say that if building roads and exploring space is justified, then building or experimenting on anything else, read solar panels and high-speed rail, is as well. If FAA regulations are justified for flight safety, then banking regulations are as well. Clearly, the highways and the FAA are not among the enumerated powers, so how are these justifiable? Well, first of all, let's just break. I'm just going to have to reread it and just kind of deal with it right now. So the first point here is, if building roads and exploring space is justified, then building or experimenting on anything else, solar panels or high-speed rail, is as well. Let's take them one at a time. I think building roads is in fact a legitimate obligation and a legitimate duty for the federal government. I think the interstate highway system was in fact one of the most brilliant things we've done in our history. It's the greatest engineering feat in the history of the world, without question. The greatest engineering feat in the history of the world. It's made road travel much easier. And if you think about the cost, since so much of our goods and services are delivered by truck, if you think about the cost of having to go down like highways like Route 66, I mean, it's saved trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars for everybody in the country. So building roads to me is well within the confines of what I foresee the federal government, or perceive the federal government, to be able to do. The second one is very different than building roads, but it's in the same sentence. Exploring space is justified. Listen, here's what I think. Here's what I think the distinction is. A wealthy society like ours, I think, shall in fact have a place for the federal government to engage in some kinds of basic research. There are some kinds of research that no one will do if it's not done by the federal government. Space probes are one of these things, and I think the superconducting super collider was one of these things. I think that it is in the national interest for us to remain at the top of the technology chain. It's not just in the national interest. It is, in fact, the prime national interest. We're outnumbered out there, if you haven't noticed. And anything that is pure research is, in fact, I think, justifiable, so long as it stays within bounds, right? I mean, NASA is spending $14 billion. It shouldn't spend anything like that. I think you probably do NASA much better with probes if you had $3 or $4 billion and you spent it wisely. And that, compared to Social Security or something, or Medicare, is insignificant. It's just not even there. It's a speck. So the difference between what I'm seeing here, Stephen, and what you're saying is, you're saying that you're claiming that you could argue that since I'm saying exploring space is justified by the federal government, then therefore solar panels and high-speed rail is as well. But there's a fundamental difference here. High-speed rail is not a technology that is. It's not a technology that only the federal government could do. It's not research. It's engineering, and especially true for solar panels. If you were talking about having a federal lab or something that was researching solar panels, and they were, like the NERVA program, they're out in Jackass Flats, Nevada, and you've got a team of 15 guys, and they are using, $20-30 million to see if they can build a better solar cell. $20 or $30 million over the course of several years. Yeah, I'd probably be all right with that, because that would be beneficial for our entire economy and would keep us in the lead technologically. But that's not what we're talking about. When Barack Obama takes $500 million and he didn't invest it in research. He invested it in a company called Solyndra, which was a for-profit company and is clearly the worst case of government and business intersecting in a way that's catastrophic. $500 million is starting to be real money. And putting it into a company that's in the manufacturing business and have them take the $500 million and then go out of business is a catastrophe. Probes and things like that, pure science, I think you can make the case for. Things like high-speed rail is a commercial enterprise. Likewise, Elon Musk is a commercial enterprise. I think NASA is a customer for Elon Musk. I said before, I don't think NASA should be in the business of running manned spaceflight. I don't think they should have ever been in the business of running manned spaceflight. And that if you look at the precursor to the FAA, the precursor to NASA, NACA, National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics, they were in fact a pure research company, and they were developing airfoils. They were looking at drag coefficients. They were basically spending money to figure out the scientific principles of flight, and all of that research paid for itself thousands of times over, because they simply now if you want an airfoil, you get the NACA 4902, the lift coefficients, drag coefficients, all laid out. You know exactly how it's done. That kind of thing is appropriate, I think, for the federal government. But making airplanes isn't. And if NACA or the FAA was manufacturing airplanes, and if the FAA was running our airlines like Aeroflot in Russia, or rather in the Soviet Union, then we'd have something like the safety record of Aeroflot, and we'd have something like the service of Aeroflot. And all of my friends in aviation say if the FAA had existed in the golden age of flying, then we would, we'd be traveling from Los Angeles to New York in a 4-engine propeller-driven airplane with wood wings, holding 30 people, flying at 7,000 feet, taking 20 hours and costing $17,000 for a ticket. So yeah, it's kind of a question of the public good. It's a question of, in fact, the actual that's it, really, right? I mean, really, there it is. The general welfare means it's for everybody. The space program benefits everybody. If you're talking about probes now, I'm not talking about running the space shuttle, but if you're talking about something like, the Voyager probes or Galileo or Cassini or New Horizons, which are done in cooperation with private, semi-private entities like JPL or Hopkins, you're getting an awful lot of bang for very little buck here. I think it's worth it just for national prestige, in my opinion. Virtually every picture we have of the solar system is due to Americans, and virtually every picture of deep space is due to Americans, from Hubble and the Webb observatories coming online, and Huygens and all this stuff. Not Huygens, Kepler. I think these are worthwhile things and good trade-offs, but they don't equal the other. And then there's a second part to this, which is the regulations part. If FAA regulations are justified for flight safety, then banking regulations are as well. That's categorically true. I mean, of course we should have banking regulations. My understanding of the role of the government is to be the referee that enforces a small set of rules. The thing that I have a problem with, and most conservatives have a problem, is when the referee starts playing as a player and is on a team. When the referee is throwing flags against one team and overlooking fouls on the other, or if the referee just picks up the ball and runs with it into the end zone the same way every time, then you've got a problem. But banks need regulations, and in fact, if you talk to most bankers, they'll tell you of course we want regulations. Without regulations, there's no law. It's ridiculous. Of course we need regulations. The question is, are those regulations designed to limit abuse, or are those regulations designed to socially engineer us in one direction or another, or towards one party or another? And that's no longer a regulation. Now you're talking about political fiat. So yes, FAA regulations are justified. Look, I understand the libertarian position regarding things like elevator safety is that every time I say the libertarian position, I always get just a blizzard of mail. But let me just say this. I have heard people who call themselves libertarians make the argument that if you would just leave people alone, you don't need elevator inspectors, because it's in the interest of every one of the people that run these companies to keep their elevators inspected because of the risk of lawsuits and damages and damage to reputation, going out of business and all the rest. That's great, but to me that's just as idealistic as communism is. People don't behave that way. Some people do. The people that we care about do. Good, well-run businesses do, but not all well-run businesses are. Not all businesses are well-run. Many of them are just venal, and and they would not inspect the elevators if they didn't need to be inspected. And that's kind of a, your fist, my nose kind of issue, right? If you want to not inspect the elevators in your home, I don't care. It's not my problem. But if I'm going to go into a building to pick up a piece of software or some goods or services or something, then I have a reasonable expectation that the building is maintained in a relatively safe fashion. And if it's not, then that guy's cheapness or laziness or whatever is impacting me. That's different than an accident, right? It's different than a one-off accident. I don't think people can be held responsible for when, a cosmic ray comes down and upsets something. But if it turns out that people are slack with maintenance in a public building that the public is in, then they're responsible for damages that come to them. I think it's pretty straightforward. And I think you have to have regulations for that. Likewise for banking. There needs to be some certain regulations about this, and we've seen from experience that things like banks have to have a certain amount of capital, and a certain amount of that total assets has to be in liquid form, and all that other stuff. These are reasonable. These are reasonable regulations. The regulations that get unreasonable are these environmental regulations that means that the entire California Central Valley is going to just simply go out of business because we're trying to protect a 3-inch sardine. We just play this game forever. The level of unreasonable regulations is enormous, but some of them are essential. Laws regulating aircraft safety on airliners are important. Some of these accidents, the ValueJet accident, and I want to say that the Alaska Air MD-80 that went inverted over just off of Point Mugu there, and was due to the fact that the jack screw on the elevator hadn't been lubricated correctly or something like that, and it just had a runaway pitch error, and plane just went inverted and went into the ocean. If you're flying on Alaska Airlines, I think you have a reasonable right to not have that happen to you. And it looks like that was a case of either neglected or overlooked maintenance. I don't want to say that's the case. I want to say that's my understanding. I don't want to perjure anybody. But there is, in fact, absolutely cases where, some of these fly-by-night airlines are just really taking risks. So, is the FAA part of the enumerated powers? No. Is the Department of Transportation? No. But interstate trade is, and the business of business between states is. And I don't think that the FAA is unreasonable, and I don't actually really think that the EPA is unreasonable if all it was. See, here's how I make the distinction. You're probably wondering, well, how am I making these decisions? It's like, it seems like you want to pick and cherry pick this and that. But for me, it's pretty simple. If it turns out that you really do believe in these kind of fundamental principles, then you should be allowed to do anything you want to until it starts to affect other people. And that's what I believe in. So if you are upriver of me and you have a business, that's your business. But if your business is pumping mercury into the river, into the water that I drink, now it's my business. You clearly, in my mind, do not have the right to do that. And somebody has to enforce these rules, and that's what the government is supposed to be here for. So that's how I see it anyway. All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get a drum roll here and maybe some bugles or trumpets or something like this. Because Jonathan K. says this is submission attempt number 10. 10. When I see somebody says my third time or fourth time, I just try to pick up that right away. 10 times. And now we know why. Here's the question. Although I presume on-air discussion will be limited without having seen the episodes in question, I'm still compelled to make the point that a small handful of the more recent episodes in the My Little Pony reboot have extremely strong conservative messaging. Surely if I've learned anything over 100 episodes of the Stratosphere Lounge, it simply must be an example of blowing up an unguarded bridge that you've alluded to, particularly in the battle space of the show's originally intended child and youth audience. I, for one, can report that with myself as a guiding parental voice to capitalize on the opening, it's working a treat to reinforce such values to my two daughters. She lifts a number of examples, and then apparently Season 6, Episode 7 is one of the ones she lists. An episode centered almost entirely on harassment and bullying, but significantly the presented solution was not anything to do with safe spaces. This one in particular seems tailor-made for you, Bill, from the Thunderbirds to Skid. Look, just watch, you'll see. So if I understand this correctly, My Little Pony is in fact providing all kinds of wonderful conservative messages, and and that I shouldn't be so hard on My Little Pony. Steve and Scott and I did a trifecta on My Little Pony, and that trifecta was the one that absolutely made the biggest splash ever. It got hundreds of thousands of views. I think we ended up in the My Little Pony documentary movie. I think we're there as, these small-minded conservatives who are, making fun of all these people. I'll just have to tell you, Jonathan, you say you're the guiding parental voice to capitalize on helping it out so that your little daughters are getting the message. My Little Pony is made for your little daughters. Have no problem whatsoever with My Little Pony made for your daughters. Have no problem whatsoever with any of this stuff made for kids. My problem with My Little Pony is when you have fully grown man-children who will not accept any responsibility. They will not accept any sense of adulthood. They're 30 years old, 25, 30 years old, and they're worshiping a show made for little girls. I think there's something off about that. One of the greatest minds out there, still out there, and certainly a major reason that I'm here, is a guy named Stephen Den Best, who was very big when I got started back in 2000, end of 2002, early 2003. Steve Den Best had a blog called USS Clueless, and he wrote the most brilliant commentary I've ever read. To this day, I still think he was the best of the best. It was relatively funny, but it was insightful and brilliant and original, and I think Stephen Den Best was just a superb mind, an incredible mind. I met him once. He's an agoraphobe, and he's a bit of an odd duck, Steve Den Best is. And then somewhere, quite a while ago now, I want to say around 2003, 4, 5, somewhere in there, Steve just gave up the ghost. He gave up on USS Clueless. He gave up on this insanely brilliant analysis of, not just of news and war and stuff, of technology. He was just brilliant. USS Clueless was brilliant. And he was I was on his blog roll for a while. It got me a lot of traffic, got me started. And then Stephen didn't leave commentary. He didn't give up on commentary, but Stephen just basically concentrated. I want to say it's chiasmatic. He basically now, his blog and his attention and his time is spent reviewing hentai and anime, Japanese animation. And a lot of it is, certainly a lot of hentai is certainly is not a big surprise. It's kind of psychosexual kind of stuff, and it's kind of, you see people in Japan, you see these Japanese men who go out and they get a Coke with a pillow, and the pillow's got the picture of their anime or their hentai girlfriend on it, and they talk to the hentai girlfriend, and they've just removed themselves from society and on some level from reality. And I mean no disrespect to Steve Den Best, who I certainly consider to be a mentor of mine and a sponsor of mine, and I certainly couldn't call him a friend, but nevertheless, I would have to say he's certainly somebody I admire very much. But when I go over there, I'm just appalled. I'm just appalled that a person with that kind of mind is spending it on this. I think it's just due to a series of emotional problems that the guy has. I just don't know what else to say about it. Look who's talking, right? I mean, we got everything in this entire room is Star Trek. Everything in this room is whimsical and stuff. And I've got the Starfleet uniform. You can see the Gorn captain here. I've got Dave Bowman on the back wall. So, you can certainly make the case that I'm certainly a fan and nerd and a geek and all that other stuff, but it doesn't prevent me from doing my adult work. I guess that's where I'm trying to go. If all I did was talk about Star Trek and all I did was just sit here and break down patterns of force or talk about technological errors in Charlie X or whatever, then I think I'd be wasting my intellect. I think it'd be wasting my life, actually. There's one thing between a hobby and an obsession, and the My Little Pony guys that I've seen are just obsessed. They're kind of like the furries. Look, these people don't cause any harm. It's not like I'm up like, my God, we've got to stop these people. I never said we have to stop them. I don't believe in any kind of coercive force at all. I think you're free to do whatever you want to do in this country. If you want to be a brony, great. You want to be a furry, great. But I think it's arrested development to see a 35-year-old man whose entire life centers around My Little Pony. I think it's Nuts. I still think it's nuts. I think it's time that some of us grew up a little bit. And again, see, this is why I don't consider myself a hypocrite. This is as whimsical and as flighty and as adolescent and boyish as any room I've ever seen in my life, but it does not prevent me from being an adult. It does not prevent me from doing my job. It does not prevent me from going out on actual dates with real grown-up women. It doesn't prevent me from maximizing what I'm doing with my life. And if all I did was sit around and talk Star Trek, I think it would. I think it'd be a terrible waste of the limited talent that I have. And when I see Steve Den Best and I see the depth of that mind going into that kind of detail, where you certainly, look, you can't write the kind of detail that he writes about without understanding that I'm quite sure he made a decent amount of money as an engineer, worked an awful lot on cell technology. I think he might have been a big part of cell phone technology. So he's watching hours of this, hours, every day, I would say, hours of it. I'm sorry, that's different than having a hobby, or different than, Halloween, or... See, like, again, I'm going to beat this to death here, but there's a word that it took me a while to figure out what it meant, but it's called cosplay, and it's costume play. Cosplay is when you see people dressed up as, video game characters or comic book characters and stuff. I think cosplay is cool. I've been to Comic-Con I've been there once. I've seen a lot of video from Comic-Con, and I think cosplay is awesome. And I used to do a little of it myself. I'd go out on Halloween, get dressed up as Captain Kirk, and great. But I did it when I was, 20, and it wasn't my entire life. And for most of these people, cosplay is in fact a hobby in the way that you and I would consider a hobby. It's not their entire lives. For some of them, it is. So yeah, listen, I'm willing to take the point, Stephen. Jonathan. I'm willing to take the point that My Little Pony is actually providing conservative messaging, and I think that's swell. And if it's providing conservative messaging for little girls or little boys, even, fine. But I don't think that there's something particularly about My Little Pony that I find unmanly. And I'm sorry, that's just the way I feel about it. I just find it just disturbingly unmanly to see 30-year-old men just sitting there watching every single episode about these, it's about cinnamon cupcake, and I just don't. I'm sorry. That's the way I feel about it. Anyway, 10 efforts to get the question answered, and it's answered. Moving on to the less critical issues of the day. Kevin Jordan says, Bill, I have been feeling unbearably depressed lately. Really? Why? Mentally and physically, despite having so much in my life and a family that I'm eternally grateful for. I think recent politics is some of it, work, stress, being underwater, etc. I need to be better for my wife and kids. This is me asking someone who I know has lived in that place before, how do you know a shortcut back to happy and healthy? Well, let's start with the basics here, since this is actually a very serious question. Kevin, if your childhood was more or less normal and relatively loving and giving and and nurturing and so on, then almost certainly you don't have a biological issue. Kids that are deprived of that, in fact, have a brain chemistry deficit. Lack of parental attention and touching and a lot of closeness and stuff. That kind of neglect rather than abuse. In many cases, psychologists will tell you neglect is worse than abuse, because at least an abused kid is aware that he's there. A neglected kid has no interaction whatsoever, and it really sets up a lot of problems. So the reason I'm starting here is because I'm going to assume that when you say feeling unbearably depressed lately, it's because of the external environment and not because of the brain chemistry. If it turns out that you have a brain chemistry issue, then you trying to be happy is like telling a diabetic that he should stop writhing on the floor in a diabetic coma. You just need to buck up, buddy. I don't care whether you're in insulin shock. Just man up and get up and, bite the bullet and get back to work. Clinical depression, biological depression is pretty much the same thing. If you have had the environment or whatever that caused you to have that kind of a deficit, it's measurable. Your serotonin levels are down, or your dopamine levels are down, and you simply are grinding metal when you should have a fairly well lubricated transmission in there. That's not your fault. And medication is tremendously effective at getting you back to a normal, more or less normal brain chemistry. I see Scott Ott has joined us. Scotty, we showed News Actually. I don't know if you were here for that, but people seem to love it. I certainly loved it, and I'm going to be working on your opening graphics real soon. I think we'll probably premiere that show next week, old boy, because I just couldn't be happier with it, Scott. Anyway, I digress. So here's where I'm starting with that, Kevin. If it turns out that you've got a brain chemistry problem, then it doesn't matter really whether the environment is simply exacerbating, your depression. I am one of those guys with those kind of problems. I'm one of those guys who just, I'm a quart low. I'm a quart low on serotonin, and I'm a quart low on dopamine. And when I have to, what it's like? It's kind of, you ever drive a car? One of these days we'll be asking that question, period. Do you ever drive a car? But I used to own cars that were so awful and expensive that you had to put almost as much oil into them as you put gas into them. You had to put oil in there every couple of days. If you're suffering from clinical biological depression, you need to take antidepressants to keep the oil levels up, or else you're going to start grinding metal. Now, let's just assume that that's not the case, because I think most of what you're saying here is external. It's the environment, politics, unbearably depressed about the future of the country. Being underwater, stress, all the rest of it. So putting the biology aside, now that we got that stated, now we're talking about something that's different. An environmental depression is something, look, I think everybody who's watching this show has that feeling. I don't think there's a person in here that doesn't wake up and look at Drudge Report or Instapundit or something and just say, I simply cannot believe this is happening to this country. Can't believe it. It can't get worse than this. And then the next day it does. It gets worse and worse and worse. Watching something you love that's precious and rare being destroyed in front of your eyes is depressing, and it's enough to make you angry. It's enough to make you genuinely nuts. It's enough to make you simply nuts. And I feel that all the time. One of the things that has kept me going, not one of the things, the thing that's kept me going, because I have to get really deep into this, this is where I live, Kevin. I'm out there. I have to filter this stuff. I have to go kind of into the depths of the worst of these stories and try to make some sense out of it. Not only trying to make sense out of it, try to make sense out of it and try to keep it somewhat optimistic, because that's my job. But it's brutally hard. Scott is here now. He's watching the show, and Scott and I have had many conversations about just how depressing and awful it is to deal with this stuff. I've called Scott once or twice from the car just saying, Scott, I got to talk to somebody because I don't know if I can take it anymore. Honestly, I don't. So the first thing I would say is get checked up, make sure that you don't have a biological problem, because that's a tough hole to climb out of if you've got that kind of a deficit. The second thing I would say is find some friends to talk to. I've called Scotty on days when I was just feeling just like that's it, it's over, just over. Why are we even wasting time talking about it anymore? And then you talk to guys like Scott and, or anybody who's a friend of yours, and you feel better. You get it out of your system. Sometimes you just have to get it out of your system. A lot of times, these thoughts that we don't get to talk about, they just build up a pressure all their own because there's no one we can really talk about them. We get kind of in this sort of a, like a feedback loop. We run around, and sometimes you just have to crack a window and let some air in there. And talking to friends is very, very good at that. And I think there is an even easier answer here. Especially to the sense of being underwater and the stress and the work hours. I took a vacation last summer for the first time in I think probably 8 years. I don't think over 8 years I'd been away for more than 3 days, and that was a speaking engagement. I would go to Coeur d'Alene for 4th of July. I'd be gone for 2 nights, 3 nights. That was it. But last year I went to Oshkosh. I was gone for 8 nights, almost 9, maybe 10. Maybe I was gone for 10 days. And I remember thinking, I simply can't leave for 10 days, because if I do leave for 10 days, this business is going to spin out of control. And if the business spins out of control, then the world will wobble on its axis, and I'm not going to get, not going to have any money, and the paychecks are going to stop. I'm going to be out on the street, and everybody's going to die and starve and all the rest of it. And Victor, Portelli comes up with the SMOD reference. Then we get to the point where you're just praying for the sweet meteor of death just to get it over with. But this is getting to the nub of what I'm trying to say here, Kevin. When you're in a pit, it's hard to see that you're in a pit. When you're in a pit, it's nothing but black. The hole is, the only sunlight you see is directly above you in a tiny little hole, and you feel like you are in the pit forever and there's no way out of the pit. On the other hand, if you're standing on ground looking down into a pit, you can see that a pit is actually a pretty limited amount of space, that a pit is an artificial space, that there is in fact plenty of sunlight out there. If you've got a guy standing on the outside of a pit and another person down at the bottom of a well, the actual reality of the world outside hasn't changed. There's just as much sun as there would be for both of them. The sun is out, the grass is blowing, the wind is blowing, the grass smells great. It's just that the person out of the pit can perceive it, the person in the pit can't. But it doesn't mean that they're living in separate realities. So a fair amount of this finding a way to get back to being happy is getting out of the pit. And getting out of the pit is usually a matter of getting out of whatever particular rhythms or habits or ruts you are in that are getting you depressed. So if it turns out that you're just losing your marbles, and I feel this way very often, and you wake up in the morning, you read Drudge, and you just go, I simply can't believe that this is happening. Then don't read Drudge, or at least don't read it in the morning. I find that if I read, often I'll just wake up, and in that kind of dream state between being fully awake and fully asleep, which is where I spend most of my time. If I get news, then it has a much more profound impact on me, and that's why all of the trouble I've ever gotten into, that I felt bad about, was because I reacted in the morning. I'll wake up, I'll see some kind of comment or something from a fan or a friend on Facebook, and it's like a minor criticism. If it's the first thing I see when I wake up, I'll just go ballistic. So don't read nasty stuff when you wake up. And if it turns out it's bugging you later in the day, don't read it at all. And getting out of the pit means getting out of the rut means using your friends more, and if it turns out that they're not helping you, then you got to get some different friends and do some things. One of the things, though, I think that really helps me the most, certainly, is this. You have to. This is actually like a kind of a get out of jail free card that I keep in my wallet here. Every time I think that the world's about to end and that America's done for and freedom's done for, and no matter how hard we try, we can't stop these people, all this. Every time I think about those things, I'm reminded of how much more serious and desperate life has been for most Americans for virtually all of our history. People like you and me are unfortunate in one level because being born in the 50s and 60s and 70s, life started for us so well. We really kind of came into the world at America at the sort of the peak of its powers, and things have gotten worse since then. But to say that they've gotten worse since they were in 65 or 63 or 73 or whatever, to say that means the end of the world is just going a little bit step too far. And where I'm going with this is this. If you think about life in America and how depressing it can be today, think about what life in America was like in 1942. Just this last Christmas, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and they didn't just attack Pearl Harbor. They destroyed all of our bases in the Philippines. They attacked Guam. They attacked Wake Island. They attacked Midway. They attacked all of Southeast Asia. Singapore has fallen. The British are out of the fight. The British send battleships down there. They're destroyed by Japanese air power. The Japanese are rolling everywhere, and there's no way to stop them. And Hitler owns all of Europe, and the only thing left standing there is a little bit of the Red Army. The Red Army's been pushed back 400 miles, 500 miles, 800 miles. And those people thought, well, the end of the country is coming for sure, and it's going to come in the form of machine guns and bombs. This jug-eared narcissist is not a threat to this country in the way that communism was or Nazism was. It's a product of Obama, and progressivism is a product of too much prosperity, too much security. And so one way you can look at it is their policies will eventually mean that the prosperity and the security goes away, and then we're going to need everybody we can who's good in emergencies. We're going to need people that know how to shoot, and people know how to farm, and people who know how to ration, and okay. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how bad things are or how bad they'll get, Kevin. The only thing that actually matters in the world is how you're going to respond to it. What are you going to do? I've made the case so many times before, I'm not going to go into it again, but I genuinely actually believe that we are sitting here today speaking English in the West and enjoying freedom and so on because one guy named Winston Churchill woke up and decided to, no, not going to give up. I really genuinely believe it. I think you can certainly make the case. If Churchill had not been the prime minister and Britain had surrendered to this, not to the degree that France had, but basically collaborated with Germany, and Hitler turned his full powers on Russia, he would have beaten Russia because he damn near beat him anyway. And if Hitler beats Russia, then cools his jets for 3 or 4 years, then with all of Europe and Europe's industry under his feet, with Imperial Japanese as allies, with Russian manpower off the table, then you can make a pretty good case. It's just a matter of time until the United States is done. You know, it's 150 million people we had, but he'd probably have, you know, you throw Russia in, you millions, almost a billion people. So Winston Churchill woke up and said, no, of course we're outnumbered. Of course we're in trouble. We thought we'd be fighting the Nazis 200 miles away with France, the biggest army in Europe, but now we don't have France. They're not 200 miles away. They're 20 miles away. And there's no reason to believe we're ever going to win this fight ever, but that's what we're going to believe. We're going to act that way. And all the great historical stories, all the stories of the kind of stories of courage that always motivate me so much are stories of the determination to fight and win despite incredible odds. Now, the Alamo is a story like that, but unfortunately the Alamo didn't turn out so well from the point of view of the Americans. But I don't know how many of you are familiar with this particular story, but I think the greatest moment of the British Empire, well, Battle of Britain, okay, but prior to that was the Battle of Rorke's Drift. Was a small fight, really. Rorke's Drift was, for those of you not familiar with the story, if you see the movie Zulu, by the way, which is a superb movie, made 1960-something, Michael Caine's first movie, it's absolutely incredible. And the reason it's so incredible and so ahead of its time, and the reason Zulu holds up so well, is because even though it was made in the 60s, the writers and the filmmakers took the Africans seriously and treated them as people. They weren't just dark savages. They were warriors, and they had their own leaders, and they had their own tactics, they had their own strategy. They had tons and tons and tons of courage. So it's a fantastic movie, holds up even today. But the story of Rorke's Drift is this. There was a trading post in the Natal, I think, called Rorke's Drift. It was just a couple of, thatched buildings and a couple of walls, a little kind of almost like adobe thing, looked kind of like a European structure. And there was a barn, and then there was a corral, and it was on the side of the river, and it was called Rorke's Drift. And the British Army went through there, and they were on their way to go and knock off Sitawaya. I cannot pronounce that name. The Zulu king. It's not quite Sitasawayo. It's something very close to that. And so the British are going to march in there and straighten these Zulus out and show them what it's all about, because the British are never defeated. They're the most powerful force in the world in 1879, I want to say, somewhere in there. And so they go marching in. They go right through Rorke's Drift. They leave a little garrison there, a couple hundred guys, and then they go in after the giant Zulu army, and the Zulu king wipes them out to a man. Pretty much to a man on the Battle of Isandlwana. It's just a mesa. Isandlwana is, I'm mispronouncing that too. I used to get these right. It was just a slaughter. I mean, they put 1,500 British there, and the Zulus just overran them. So far, so good, right? I mean, now Rorke's Drift is this: the entire main force of the British Army has been killed. Every one of them's just been killed, stabbed to death, and they're just corpses on the ground. Guys ride back to Rorke's Drift, where there's something like 130 men, 160 men, something like that, and they say the entire Zulu army is coming after us. 8,000, 9,000 warriors, something like this, and they're going to be here in 3 hours, because the Zulus could run almost as fast as a horse. They could run for 5-10 hours and go right into battle. It's the kind of shape they were in. So these guys run back, and what happens? You got these 2 British Army officers. They're not generals. They're not colonels. They're not majors. They're nothing. They're just lower level guys. 2 lieutenants, Chard and Bromhead. Chard was a Royal Engineer, and he outranked Bromhead by about a day or two. He was commissioned like 2 or 3 days before Bromhead, who ostensibly was the military guy. So Chard the Royal Engineer, takes Setawayo. Thanks. So Chard, the engineer, Royal Engineer, takes command of this little garrison and starts to turn what is essentially just a mission outpost into a fortress, a defensible fortress. He starts piling up these mealy bags, and he has a second fallback position. He's got a third fallback position. He's got coverage on this. He's got shooters over here. He's doing everything he can. The Zulus come in from Isan Luana, 8,000 strong, and they start their war chants, and they start this terrifying dance and this Zulu, this really low-pitched kind of thing. And they start advancing on Rourke's Drift, and Chard and Bromhead and the rest of these guys just start. They get out the Martini Henrys, and which is a single bullet rifle. It's a breech loader, but it's not a bolt action. Well, it is a bolt action, but it's not like there's a clip in there. It's one bullet goes in, bolt, unload, another bullet. The damn bullets are like the size of these grenade launchers. I mean, the slug is so huge. Guys are just getting broken shoulders firing these things. And so the Zulus keep coming on, and then they stop, and the fire pushes them back, and then they come in from a different direction, and they push them back, and then they start shooting down from the heights, and they push them back, and then the Zulus come over the fence, and now these guys are inside the wire, so to speak, and now they go back, they fall back to another position where he's got Char to set up like a redoubt inside there, where everybody now, the survivors, 120 or 30 of them or something, is clustered inside an area the size of this studio, or smaller, and they just keep fighting. And finally, the Zulus just say, this nut is too tough to crack, we're going to go. And the chances of them surviving that on paper are zero, right? I mean, it's zero. 160 guys to 8,000, at night? Come on. But they didn't look at it that way. Chard and Bromhead decided that this position was defensible. They made a plan, and they stuck to the plan. And they innovated and they improvised when things started going off script. The Zulus got into one of these buildings, a hospital building, and the walls were made out of such thin, kind of a crummy adobe that you could take a bayonet or a sagi spear, and you could simply start making a hole in the wall. So these Zulus get in on one side, and they're coming through the building, but they're not coming from the outside where they got coverage. They're literally going through the walls. Yeah, Bindlestiff says, clip, you've triggered me. It was a clip in, not a magazine on things like the Gewehr 98. That's a clip. It's a stripper clip. Anyway, they fight to the last man, and the casualties were actually relatively light. I want to say they lost 20 or 30 people. However, the point of all this is this. The British equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor is the Victoria Cross, and more Victoria Crosses were awarded that day than any other day in the history of the British Empire. And that includes days in World War I where you might have 100,000 guys on the field. The 168 guys there, or something like that number. I forget the number of Victoria Crosses. I want to say it was 24, 23, 24, something like that. They just didn't give up. And so not only did they win that battle, but they had won the battle of the mythology. They won the battle of history and hope. So they didn't just beat the Zulus. They beat the Zulus in a way that encourages all the rest of us to understand that we can fight and beat enormous odds. Enormous odds. It's not about the numbers. It's not about the numbers. It's not about the weapons. It's not about the tactics. It's about the heart. It's about morale. It's about courage. And Ohio Coastie just brings up a great example. Rourke's Drift is, in fact, like the Spartans in Thermopylae. 300 was a tremendous movie. I know it was a cartoon, but I don't care. I loved it. I loved it. I loved the effect that 300 had on 15-year-old boys coming out of the theaters. They were saying, "Yeah, the Spartans are like the Marines, and the Persians are like the Muslims, and these guys were just in such great shape." And I've said this before, but if you look at the movie 300, a lot of people really put it down because they're saying it's like gay porn because Leonidas and all these Spartans are in literally unbelievable shape. And they're the kind of shape that a Western civilization, 21st century nutrition and exercise can get you into. None of those guys look like that. And so why did he do it? Well, I think the director did it because he wanted to show on the outside the discipline that they developed on the inside. I think that's why these guys were such incredibly ripped actors playing the roles. They were such supermen on the outside because he couldn't show the years and years and years and years and years of deprivation and discipline that the Spartans had internally, so he had to show it externally. You would see these guys, you say, my God, these are Supermen. Well, they were, but they were Supermen because of what had happened on the inside. These last stand stories are really important because they show us that sometimes you lose. You know, Custer loses. Sometimes the Alamo you lose. But sometimes you win. And you're not going to win if you don't fight. That's the lesson I'm trying to impart here on all of this, Kevin, is no matter how depressed you get about all this stuff, and you may think that our chances of winning are slim, and sometimes I think that too, but our chances of winning are zero if we give up. Our chances of winning are zero if we just give up. And despair is what they want from us. They want us to be filled with despair. It's not accidental. The reason this iron triangle of Democrats in Washington, news media in New York, and storytellers in Hollywood are trying so hard to tell every single one of us that we're dustbin of history and that, you know, our time is past and we're dinosaurs and you need to get with the program is because they want us all to be despairing and give up. That's a great strategy. I don't blame them one bit. Ironkid brings up another great example in history that I had forgotten as well, and that's Agincourt. You know, the British meet a French force. The actual numbers are in some dispute, but I want to say it's something like 1,500, 1,600 British soldiers and archers under King Henry V, going up against a number of something like 20,000, 50,000, 70,000 French, something shocking like that. And they just beat them. They beat them because of strategy. They beat them because Henry understood the way they were going to fight. He had the British longbow. It's not just enough to have the longbow. You have to have a strategy so that the longbow causes these Frenchmen to panic and causes them to force themselves into such a small area and funneled them into such a small area that the French knights, armored knights, you know, longbowmen are no match for these guys in close quarters. Henry figured out a way to get them funneled in so tightly that they literally couldn't swing their weapons, and then they just shot them to pieces. And so, you know, courage is important, and brains is important, and mostly stamina is important. Mostly perseverance. It's perseverance. It's true for anything. I think it was Calvin Coolidge talked about that. He said, you know, perseverance is the essential quality. Genius isn't going to do it. Unrewarded genius is everywhere. You know, I forget, hard work, whatever. He said, persistence, just got to keep getting in there. So that's why I'm so proud to do the work I do, to the degree that I can have an effect on people. It's made me extremely proud, and the comments I get the most often are the ones I like the most. And people will come up to me occasionally in an airport. And by the way, if you are one of those people who happen to see me in an airport or in Vegas or something, by all means, please come up and say hi. No matter what I'm doing, just come up and say hi. But the comments I get are you give me ammunition that I can argue with over the water cooler, or I thought I was the last person in the world who had this kind of sense of common sense, or you've got the kind of clarity on issues that just cuts right through all of these, you know, progressive sophistry, and you make me realize, no, we're right after all. It's like, well, that's what I'm here for, I think, and it's certainly an honor to be a part of that. So, Kevin, I'm going to let this one go now, but I just tell you this. First of all, if it turns out that you really can't shake this, just send me an email directly. Send it to info@billwhittle.com. That'll go to it'll go to Carla, and then she'll get it to me, and we'll talk. But hopefully this will help, because, you know, we're in this together, man, and that's it. And if you're feeling depressed, it's because you know, and underwater and all the rest of it, it's because you're talking to people who don't really get it. You talk to guys like Scott Ott, you talk to anybody here in the Stratosphere Lounge. It's a mutual encouragement thing. That's why Rourke's Drift worked. Chard thought they were going to die, but the people watching Chard said, my God, he thinks we're going to win this thing. All right, then, if he believes it, then I believe it. That's what leadership is. Leadership is going out there with an attitude like we're going to kick their asses, when you inside feel like we don't have a chance here. Well, we don't have any chance if we don't fight. So if we're going to fight, we're going to have to fight bravely. And if we're going to fight bravely, it's up to the leader to put some morale into these people. I'm the leader. It's my job. So I'm going to go out there and I'm going to pump these guys up. I think it's exactly what Churchill did and what all of these great leaders do. They have they make the moral decision to accept the fact that while defeat may be likely, it's certain if you don't fight. And so let's fight. And so many times small groups of people fighting tenaciously for their lives have such an impact on large forces that the large forces will break. It is morale. The Spartans held those Persians off, million Persians or whatever, for days. Rorke's Drift, they could have kept going. Obviously, if the Zulus had spent their last man, they would have killed everybody there. But after the garrison there of 150 guys killed 3,000 of these Zulus, the Zulu king said, wasn't actually Sadaweya, it was one of the princes. He just basically said, no, I don't think so. I think this is costing us way too much money. If it costs us 3,000 guys to kill 20 of them, and there's 160 of them left, I don't think this is worth it. That's a win. So hang in there, buddy. This one I can answer rather quickly. Are we doing on timer? Yeah, it's about time for me to go. Dave Olson, our friend, is always such a big part of this, says, SpaceX has now landed 3 rockets on a barge at sea. Will they continue to increase their index of human awesomeness, or will we become complacent when they keep sticking the landings? And the reason I wanted to take that question, Dave, is that when we become complacent, that's when we win. We're no longer amazed that an airliner lands safely. We're amazed when an airliner doesn't land safely. We're astonished and shocked. People who are afraid of flying, we haven't had a fatal accident on a major carrier in 15 years. It'll be 15 years in September. 15 years of 30,000, 40,000 flights a day, and not a single crash of an American carrier with an actual jet. We had one. It happened right after September 11th. There was the American Airlines crash. Airbus crashed in New York, and that was the clock reset. And since then, it's been almost 15 years, and we haven't had a single fatality on a major airliner. We came pretty damn close when Captain Sullenberger lost both engines climbing out of LaGuardia. But, coolness under pressure and training, courage, competence, and skill meant that record is still holding because he got every single one of them out of there. And that's all that really matters. So when the extraordinary becomes commonplace and boring, Dave, that's when you've succeeded. Air travel used to be unspeakably dangerous. And if you read Fate is the Hunter, it's about the very first days of commercial aviation right after World War II. You'd find out these guys were losing an airplane a week. They'd lose a crew and the people on board a week. Whereas Johnson and Edwards, they flew into a mountain in Montreal. Oh, okay. What happened to these guys? Well, they were killed. Looks like a rudder, departed the airplane over the South Pacific. Okay. We learn, they say federal aviation regulations are written in blood. It's really true. If the best you can hope for, I think certainly the case with the Virgin crash, the Virgin America Spaceship Two crash. To me, it's unreasonable that you will not make mistakes and kill people. I think there's a minimum cost of lives that has to be paid. Because if you're doing something new, you're making mistakes that no one's made before, and you won't know what they are until you make them. And some of them you'll get lucky on, and some of them you won't. And the only thing that's unforgivable in an environment like that is to make the same mistake twice. That's paying extra. Now you're adding interest to the bill, and you're making unforced errors. You can't really go up and make the same mistake twice. You have to go up and make a new mistake now. One of the things they say one of the things my flight instructor said to me real early was, Bill, learn from other people's mistakes because you're not going to live long enough to make them all yourself. That's right. I read accident reports and I say, I shouldn't have done this. And I was up there over the mountains last couple nights ago in a single-engine airplane in the dark. I was thinking I should not have put myself in this situation. And I don't think I'll put myself in that situation again. But at the same time, I was thinking, I did know that this was a possibility, and I did think that this was well within my capabilities, and it is well within my capabilities. So, it was memorable, and I had to focus, but I don't think it was ever dangerous. Certainly I wasn't ever in a space of like, my God, what's going to happen? It was just, all right, just keep it under control and don't hit anything. I think actually, Dave, the problem is simply that we're going so slowly that we're trying to avoid paying the price at all, and therefore we're not only going to pay the price, but we're not going to get what we want. We're not going to get what we're paying for. Progress costs lives, and there are people who do the flying who are fully prepared to take that risk. They were prepared to take that risk in the 60s. They're prepared to take that risk in the dawn of aviation. You know, most of those guys who went up in those crates were killed. Orville Wright was very nearly killed. He has a terrible crash. He never really fully recovered, but they're prepared to take the risk. It's not a suicide mission, but it's dangerous. I forget what the number of original male pilots, when they first started flying male in the late 20s and 30s, they're flying in sleet. There's no navigational systems. They're literally flying underneath the scud levels 200 feet above the ground, trying to read the name of the town off of the water tower. And these guys were losing 1 out of every 4 guys, you know. And I understand that during the golden age of test flight out in Edwards Air Force Base, the chance of a test pilot coming back from a mission was 75%. He had a 25% chance of not coming home every time he went up. You run those odds, it's murder. But we don't make the mistakes that we made then. We made new mistakes. And with civil aviation, as far as civil aviation is concerned, the fact that we've gone 15 years without a fatality is an indication that we have about run out of mistakes. That's not to say we won't find something new. We will. But we have certainly made all of the common mistakes, and we've made most of the outlying mistakes, and we've also understood how mistakes are made. Some of the procedures that they put into place in commercial aviation cockpits have since been moved into the operating room by pilots who happen to be doctors, because one of the things, this is a perfect example actually, one of the things that one of these regulations written in blood is the idea of a sterile cockpit. And what that means is it is now against FAA regulations, kind of a nice tie into earlier, for a commercial crew, a pilot and co-pilot. It is against regulations, and they can lose their license over this, to talk about anything other than the flying at hand during critical flight phases like taxi out, takeoff, landing, and so on. Because looking at the black boxes and listening to the voice recorders, we found out that entire airplanes full of people, 140 people, died because the pilot and the co-pilot were talking about a date that he was about to have, and they were so into that aspect of it that they forgot to set the flaps for takeoff or something like that. So now you're not allowed to do that anymore. Now the only conversation that's allowed during these critical flight phases is conversation directly related to the flight. That has saved lots of people. Lots of people. That mistake not only did we not have to make again, but we basically eliminated any number of upcoming mistakes because of things like that. And when they take it to the operating room, things like checklists, things like having to get verbal confirmation from other team members, then you find out that the number of errors in the surgical wards goes way, way down. Way down. You're not amputating the wrong leg anymore, because now you've got a co-pilot surgeon who says, we're going to confirm now on our checklist that we are in fact going to amputate the right leg. And he says, well, I'm kind of prepping the left leg. Well, we got a little problem here, sir. It works. So, and it works because we paid for it. It worked because we found out why people died when we didn't do it that way. And as I say, we're running out of errors in commercial aviation. We're now at the point where 15 years of an unbroken safety record is telling me that we've gotten all the demons pretty much wrung out of the system. Nothing is really going to come at us as just like, what? I don't think. And that's not to say we won't have mistakes, but we'll have mistakes that will be, shouldn't have done that, as opposed to what the hell happened. By the way, they say that if you're killed as a pilot and you go to the pearly gates, there's one of 2 answers that you're going to get, or questions rather, that you're going to get from St. Peter, and one of them is okay and the other one's not. If you get up to the pearly gates after you've been killed in a plane crash and St. Peter says to you, hey, tough break, kid, then okay. You got hit by a meteorite, or an elevator fell off, or some part failed that we didn't know before. Tough break, kid, sorry it had to be you, but, dems the brakes. On the other hand, if he says, what were you thinking? That's a whole different animal. You should have known better, and you did know better, and you did it anyway. That's just stupidity as opposed to bad luck. Anyway, 2 to 3 to go. I think we can probably do. Michael Silva Sandim says, "Hey Bill, Canadian millennial fan here. Awesome, thank you, Michael. Just wanted to know what you thought about Milo Yiannopoulos recently being shut down at a speaking event at DePaul University last week. It was the first time he actually had to cancel an event. Do you think the rising backlash is a good thing or a good sign or a bad sign? Also, when do we get to see you talk with Stefan Molyneux again? I personally really miss those discussions. Me too. Had an awful lot on my plate, but we'll be bringing those back once things settle down a little around here. So, look, I think Milo Yiannopoulos is one of the most powerful pieces on the board. I think he's unbelievably effective, and that's why he has to be destroyed. You can't have an openly gay person Republican, like in the same way that you can't have famous movie star women being Republican, in the same way that you can't have black people being Republican, because it destroys the narrative. And the narrative is that the Republicans are the racists and they're the misogynists and they're the homophobes. And if you have a gay Republican, then that makes it a lie. And if that gay Republican is getting tremendous support from his supposedly, homophobic base, then that also destroys the narrative. And if the fact that this homosexual, flagrantly homosexual guy is in fact being shut down and bullied by people on the left, the progressives, that also is a pretty powerful lever of truth to wield against these people. The genius of Milo is that he understands the way the game is played in terms of the victimhood hierarchy, and he just plain runs with it. I think he probably understands the media better than anybody I've seen since Andrew Breitbart. He understands how they work. So when you've got a conservative out there making the case for conservatism, and it's called the Dangerous Faggot Tour, you've got a real problem if you're the left. Real problem. Big problem. And that same problem that you would have with somebody like, if it turned out that Brad Pitt was a conservative, you'd have a real problem because the social proof is breaking down. So as far as the shutting down the event goes, I've seen the video of that. Those people got up on stage and, really, really physically threatened him. I don't think I'd be sitting there flinching like that. If somebody was in my face like that, I suspect one of us is going to jail. I certainly hope that's the case. I don't know. If you think that was terrifying, I got a chance to talk to Ben Shapiro's bodyguard, who said that they were in New York and Black Lives Matters people were starting to bash down the door. Literally bash down the door, and they're talking. Ben Shapiro was speaking there, and you could hear from outside. You're hearing "Kill the Jew," and they're. So the security guy goes and opens the door with a gun drawn. He says, "I think we all ought to back up now because this is how people get killed," and that's not funny, at all. I'm going to be doing some colleges and stuff. I don't think I don't get that kind of reaction. Probably because I'm not quite so provocative, but I have to be prepared for it. And on some level, I feel a little, hurt that I haven't gotten that kind of protesting yet. But, hey, take care, Foghorn. Yeah, he's dangerous. He has to be stopped. And so does, Ben Johnson, and so does Stacey Dash and all the rest of them. They're just, by their presence, destroying their narrative. And they're fantastically valuable pieces, and I haven't met him, but I sure would like to. I'd like to shake his hand. He's a really good guy. 2 to go. Laura Wallace says, should Ted Cruz accept any Trump administration post? I think he should refuse anything up to and including vice president, but would not mind seeing him leave the Senate to take Justice Scalia's place. Otherwise, I want him fighting and leading in the Senate. He's my senator. He has said he's not really interested in being appointed to the Supremes. What do you think? Ted Cruz was my candidate, obviously. I know Ted rather well. I think Ted Cruz is the only... I think he's... Well, we can probably get down to 2 or 3 anyway, of the people that are actually in office in Washington that genuinely get it. I think he's irreplaceable. I'd love to see Ted Cruz on the Supreme Court. I cannot imagine a better place for him than being on the Supreme Court, with the possible exception of stop before then. If Donald Trump is elected, if it were... who knows what Donald Trump's going to do, but if it were me... I would not put Ted Cruz right on the Supreme Court. I would I'd put Ted Cruz on and make him Attorney General, because I want somebody to go in there and clean up this mess. I want somebody to go looking at all these NSA, excursions. I want people looking into Benghazi. I want people looking into all of these missile defense deals. I want people looking into the Iranian deal. I want somebody in there who's going to bring these people to justice. And I've said before, I don't think these people should go to jail. I don't think Hillary Clinton should go to jail. I think she should be disgraced for the rest of her life. But I don't want to live in a country where the next administration puts the previous administration in prison. I think that's kind of a banana republic. I think they ought to prosecute Hillary Clinton. They ought to find her guilty of all these charges. They ought to sentence her to 20 years in prison or whatever she's due to get. And then I don't think she's pardoned. I think the sentence is suspended. In the interest of comity, is it comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, is that the word? In the interest of civility, in the interest of the country, we're not going to put you in jail, though you have been found guilty and you have been sentenced to jail. We're not going to put you in jail. And we're not pardoning you either. We're just not going to enforce this judgment against you. And that's going to take an attorney general. And he can be attorney general for a number of years, and then he can go and become a Supreme Court justice after that. I think that'd be great. I think the best thing I can think of for Ted Cruz. And the last one for the night is from Cameron C. Smith. Do we really gotta love Bernie? I hear this a lot from folks about 18 to 20. I guess because he's an old white guy with an accent, maybe. I'm not really sure. I have an idea of how I would shut this down, but how would you shoot this down? My next video is going to be called Bernie's Free College Isn't Free, and you have to understand what it is about Bernie that appeals to young people and what it is about Bernie that allows Bernie to get to where he is and why Bernie is such a big believer in all of this nonsense, because he really does believe it. Bernie Sanders is running one of the oldest scams in the world, and that is the envy scam. He's basically doing the one thing that has destroyed all republics throughout history and turned them into dictatorships, because they simply cannot survive this. When you can convince people that they can vote themselves money out of the treasury, which means vote themselves money out of money that's been taken from other people, then it's game over. And Bernie is using people's envy and their jealousy to demonize the people that he's going to try and take stuff from. And then he's also appealing to people's avarice and resentment. He's basically saying these people have more than you do, and it's not fair. And I am going to go get you your fair share of their stuff. There's a certain kind of person that really finds that extremely appealing, and I would say most people probably find that appealing. And they know on some level that just going into somebody's house and taking all their stuff is stealing. So you have to make the case that they got it illegally, because then taking their stuff is justice. Otherwise it's stealing. So Bernie's basically doing what incompetent people have done their entire lives. And lazy people. Bernie Sanders is incompetent and he's lazy. He's never worked a day in his life that wasn't a government job. He was just repeatedly just thrown out of jobs or thrown out of opportunities and stuff because he was just lazy. He took advantage of his wife and took advantage of this money, took advantage of this and that. Bernie is simply lazy. But Bernie wants some of the nice things in life, and Bernie has figured out that the way to do it is to promise some people something taken from other people. Works like a charm on the short term. It's all the communists were about. It's all the Nazis were about. Let's look at how these guys got started and how Lenin and Trotsky and then later Stalin sold this, and then how Adolf Hitler sold it. It's either the kulaks or the bourgeoisie or the landowners. They've taken more than their fair share. Let's go kill them and take their stuff. Or it's the Jews, or it's the 1%ers, or it's the intelligentsia in Cambodia and China and all the rest of it. Right? The first thing you have to do is you have to make these people demons, because if they're not demons, you can't steal from them and you can't kill them. But once you've made them demons, then you can take their stuff and give it to you. When I talk about in the firewall that's already a week late, I basically said Bernie's talking about free college, and I simply say, what does that mean? What does free college mean? All right, you want to vote for Bernie, and Bernie's going to give you free college. What does it mean? Does it mean that the teachers aren't going to get paid? That they're going to volunteer their time? Does it mean that that the college isn't going to have to pay for water or internet costs? Does it mean if you turn on the lights in a lecture hall that the electric company's not going to bill them? Is that what it means? Free college? Because if it doesn't mean that, then free college is a non sequitur. If it doesn't mean that, then it means that it's free to you, but somebody's paying for it. And so the question then becomes, young millennial Bernie supporter, you want this because it's being paid for, but it's not being paid for by you yet. But in the olden days of 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you would have to get a loan from either your parents or from a bank. In order to get that loan, you would have to show that you had the ability to pay it off, which means that loans for $250,000 for medieval Renaissance poetry were not being written because banks and parents knew there was no way on earth that this was ever going to be repaid. And so student loans were available to people who showed some degree of aptitude in working and who were going to be in positions that would pay well. And if it turned out you wanted to be in medieval Renaissance poetry, you might be able to borrow $5,000 or $10,000. You're not going to borrow $250,000 for that. Once Obama comes in through Obamacare, through the healthcare law, makes all of this student loans guaranteed by the government, what does that do? Well, it's the same thing as with the housing crisis. When housing and mortgages are based on a risk-reward relationship, a bank will put up some of its capital, some of its assets, in order to make more capital if the risk is worth the reward. If these people seem likely to pay it back, then we'll do it. We understand some people who we approve are going to default on the loan, but that's why we have a credit rating. And over time, we get a pretty good idea who's going to pay things back and who's not. So it's the same thing with student loans. It's no longer about whether or not the student can pay the loan back, because the federal government can pay any price that the universities care to charge. So since the federal government's guaranteeing the loan, the colleges are raising their tuitions through the roof, and people are getting themselves $250,000 debts. And then people that are trying to sell them more snake oil, I hear this on the radio on Sirius all the time. It's enough to make me want to take my car off a bridge, honestly. There's an ad out there that says, don't let the credit card companies fool you into thinking you have to repay everything. Don't let the credit card companies fool you into thinking that you're responsible to pay this bill. And then they go on about how you can get debt relief or debt just completely forgiven and stuff. And it's like, that's what they're telling people. Don't let them fool you into thinking that you're responsible for paying back the money you signed on the dotted line for. Okay. It'd sound good to me if I had a big student loan too. By the way, if they make student loans guaranteed, and if they forgive all the student loan, if they just forgive it, if they just say, if Hillary's elected, they just say, we're just going to forgive it, all the money that you racked up, it's owed the government. We're just going to say, in the interest of the country and the American dream, we're just going to forgive it. I think there should be a class action lawsuit from every single person in this country who ever had to pay student loans back, and I'm one of them. And I think we ought to be able to say, hey, listen, I am not going to be a chump here. I paid all this money in because I borrowed it. I'm responsible for it. And if I'm doing the right thing and I'm getting screwed by these guys who are doing the wrong thing and they're getting benefits, no, just sue them. So college isn't free. This is the point. I just digress as I always do. I said, you like college, you Bernie supporters, because you think it's free and it's not being paid for you, and you're not paying for it yet. Back in the old days, you might take out 10 grand, 15, 20 grand, or 50 grand for a loan. If you're an engineer, you might go to 100 grand, 200 grand. If you're going to be a doctor, you'd pay it back. And it might take you 5 or 10 years to pay it back. But once you paid it back, it was paid back. You people who think you're going to get your free college are going to be paying. You're going to pay for the free college. Okay? You're going to pay for it. You think the rich are going to pay for it? They're not. The rich, income tax does not affect the rich. The rich simply... They've got their wealth is already there. Income tax is just measuring how much is coming in. If they're going to put a 97% income tax on things, rich people just won't have any more income anymore. They'll just sit on what they're already got, and they won't spend it on new companies or anything like that. They're just going to keep it. So you're not going to take it from the rich. You're going to be paying for it yourself. And what's going to happen is this: you are going to get your free college, and then Bernie's going to put this on the national debt tab. And the national debt's going to go from $20 billion, which is double what it was for the previous 43, 44 presidents, and it's going to go to $37 trillion or $40 trillion. And you think that's not a problem because being 20 years old, you think that, well, okay, whatever, if we default, we default. But I'm here to tell you, you cannot make $35,000 billion simply go away and have things be the way they were before it happened. It just, no. As I say in this video, if it turns out that you think that the default is going to be in your favor, if this government defaults on that debt, your problem's not going to be finding a job that gives you free Uber and 2 hours of social media a day. Your problem is going to be, will I be able to catch enough rats to eat over spits on burning tires out in the street to get me through the evening? That's what your problem's going to be. So you're going to pay for this free college. And you're going to pay for this free college every single year of your life. For the rest of your life, you're going to be paying tax rates that are much higher than they would have been otherwise. And every single year, you're going to give up 2/3 or 3/4 of what you make for that free college. And you're going to be paying for that free college every single day for the next 60, 70, 80 years. And furthermore, because of this debt and because of these tax rates, you're not going to get a job because that free college that you got is going to cost you a job every day. Companies are going to be looking at not going to be looking at how many people we can hire this year. They're going to be looking at how few people can we afford to fire and still stay in business. How few people are we going to have to let go? So you're going to be living a life of slavery and destitution. Destitution. You're going to be poor. You're going to be poor because you're going to want the same thing as everybody else has, and when the government's out of money, everybody's going to get crap. It's what happens everywhere. It's happened in the Soviet Union. It goes everywhere. There is no free college because if it was free, then teachers wouldn't charge and you wouldn't have to pay for the electricity. It's being paid for by somebody else, and the somebody else that's paying for your free college is you. You're paying for it. You idiots are paying for it. All the people that ran up the debt prior to you are going to be dead, and you're going to be paying it off. You know, each person American born now comes into the world with what is it? Each individual person has $75,000 worth of debt in order to pay off the national debt. You come into the world with $75,000. Oh man. So that's how you get around them. You know, you have to call out their the moral lowliness of this. I'm certainly not going to go this again because I hardly give a public speech ever. But I basically, you say, hey, listen, guys, you want wealth redistributed to you, but you don't want to redistribute your own wealth, because if you did, you'd sell your Xboxes and your phones and you give it to homeless people. So you don't get a high horse on this. You're stealing from people, and you're trying to make other people pay for stuff that you want because you're lazy and because you're kind of evil, and you're raised that way. They all have to be virtue signaling. They all have to be social justice warriors. And when you convince them that they're actually just common thieves, then you can start to change some minds. And we'll see. I just wish, even some of the most reasonable wishes are unreasonable. I just wish that these progressives would give us a state or two where they just leave us alone. Yeah, Oklahoma and Idaho. You have no federal taxes, nor do you get any federal assistance. You're on your own. You don't have to pay a federal income tax, but you don't get any federal benefits. If you want to improve the interstate highway system or the airports, you have to pay for it yourself. I think if they did that, it would be absolutely astonishing. Every single conservative with any kind of brain would move to Oklahoma or Idaho or wherever, and that place would become then the powerhouse of the world. They would produce everything that would be of value. They'd have all of the invention would belong there, their capital, their innovation, everything would come right out of that one little state where they're being left alone. And even something as simple as that seems to be really off the table. That's why I'm glad there's a Texas. And when I say that, it's not just I'm glad that there's one state that's got enough culturally behind it so that it's not buying into this as quickly as everybody else is. I also like the fact that Texas is the only state that was once its own country and is prepared to be again, I think. Texans are different because unlike every other state in the Union, they were their own independent country, fought for their own independence from Mexico, voluntarily surrendered their independence, and then transferred it to the Confederacy, and then transferred it back to the Union. But you can always tell it's like, well, we're going to see how this works. The idea that Texas could just go off and start its own country, people ask me all the time why I don't move to Texas, because I like California, I like the weather. If Texas becomes its own country, I'm there. I'm going to be there. I'm already an honorary citizen of the Republic of Texas, thanks to Ted Cruz, by the way. So I got my cowboy hat and I got my spurs and I'm armed. So I think I'll probably be fitting in there just fine. Anyway, I think that'll do it for the night. This is a little longer than I thought. That's actually a bit longer than I thought. I don't care. Hour and 47 minutes, not too bad. And so, my friends, another epic Stratosphere Lounge comes to an end. I know that the people that are watching this live generally pretty much limited to people who are in medical comas in hospitals and night watchmen who are snoozing through the evening out in Nowheresville. But for those of you that are here watching, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I feel so bad about having to make this show the bottom of the priority stack, but something has to be. There's just so much editing to do. There's so much things that have to get done, and I'm sorry when I have to miss 2 in a row. And I'm sorry if I have to miss next week. I'm not planning on it, but we are going to get stabilized. We have taken on an enormous amount of new work. And I actually feel for the first time, really, since I've been running this business, I really feel like for the first time ever, this membership is worth the money. I want to be clear on this. The people that had supported us previously, I don't feel like I was ripping them off. I was doing everything I possibly could, shoveling as much snow as I could. But I think the people prior to this were doing it to get the message out there, and certainly they were generous enough and big-hearted enough and kind enough to not hold me to the membership deliverables. But things are different now. If you go look at BillWhittle.com, you're going to see members-only content posted almost every day. I'm really actually starting to feel like it's worth it. Certainly, as I said at the beginning of the show, my attitude towards the work is completely different. It's just 100% different. I'm so happy to be working with Scott and Steve, and we have assistant editors, and now I have the problem that many of you business owners have. It's not just a question of feeding me anymore. Previously, it was feeding me and feeding Carla. Now there's 5 or 6 people, pretty much all of them part-time, but, they're counting on me, and I'm counting on you, and you're counting on somebody else. And so if you're one of those people that have become a member recently, I cannot thank you enough. If you're one of those people who have been here since the beginning, then I cannot thank you enough more. And with that, I think we will probably close out episode 120 of the Stratosphere Lounge, and we'll send the secret decoder rings and all the rest of the stuff that you guys need. And until then, keep eating that Alpo and brushing with Preparation Nature, whatever the sponsors are for this week. I've completely lost track. Getting a little loopy now. I got a lot of work to do before I go home. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.